2, 1.
Good evening. Tonight, the candidates for governor of Tennessee will be questioned by a studio made up of citizens of Middle Tennessee. They were selected for their cultural, ethnic, and political diversity. Also in the studio tonight are journalists from the CBS stations, which are broadcasting this debate tonight. Let's meet the candidates. First, Mayor Phil Bredesen, who is the Democratic nominee for governor, and Congressman Don Sundquist, who is the Republican nominee for governor. The candidates have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then the other candidate not asked the question will have 1 minute to respond. Mayor Bredesen, I will start the questioning. Up until this point, race has not been an issue in this campaign. Yet the chief political columnist for the Tennessean in Sunday's paper accused your opponent of playing a race card when in the first debate he accused you of having 2 convicted felons working your campaign. Both are black, both are from Memphis. One, a member of the politically prominent Ford family. And according to the political columnist, he hung the, I think, necklace of the Ford political machine around your neck, something like that, and claimed that was a racist thing to do. My question to you is, do you think that's an unfair question? And do you think Don Sundquist is a racist for bringing it up?
No, I don't think it's unfair. Let me say, first of all, that I do think that this campaign has been mercifully free of those kinds of innuendos, and that has been very pleasing to me, and I imagine has been very pleasing to the congressman. I think we have conducted the debate on issues having to do with the candidates' records, having to do with the issues as are presented. I thought that the pulling out of 2, quote, convicted felons in answer to a question was way off the point. We were talking about Kirby Pines at the time, and the issue was that I apparently had bought ham and cheese sandwiches from a convicted felon who ran a delicatessen, which is a far different matter than having a convicted felon running millions of dollars of senior citizens' money. But I don't think that was playing the race card, and I think we've been thankfully very free of that.
Mr. Sundquist, do you want to respond to that at all?
Thank you, Chris. Now, I think the article that Larry wrote was absurd. Anyone who knows me knows it's not true. We had a dinner a couple nights ago. Bishop Graves, the bishop of the CME Church, gave a glowing comment about me in a speech at that place. So we're free, thankfully, of racism in this campaign. Now, Mr. Bredesen's talking about the expenditure with Mr. Ford on what he said were ham and cheese sandwiches was about, I think, $9,000. That's an incredible amount of ham and cheese sandwiches. So the subject is not racism, is how did he spend his money in Memphis during the primary? That's the question.
We have a question from the audience.
Yes, my name is Edith Hammonds. I'm president of the Organized Victims of Violent Crime. I want to direct my question to Mr. Sundquist. Tennessee currently has a cancer slowly eating away at the very heart of our criminal justice system, but it's rapidly spreading across the entire state. And it is the public paid bail bonding system under the pretrial release program now in effect. Now, this program in essence forces the taxpayers and the victims to pay the bail bonds of those who continually victimize us. Now, if you are elected governor, would you take steps to support legislation to ban this program in the entire state, or would you allow it to continue the way it is, in essence making victims of everybody? This is a program
let's let him answer.
This is okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the question. I am concerned about victims of crime. We put out a crime package in June, and one segment of that crime package talked about victims. And I'd met a woman in Memphis who had moved from Chicago with her 2 children for safety. Found out that one of the boys had gotten killed, and so she started this program. Being concerned about victims' rights is important. We ought to worry more about victims and less about criminals. I believe that the bail bond system ought to be reviewed. There ought to be a process for someone to achieve bond under certain crimes, but if people are being victimized, then I think it bears looking at, and I will do that.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the pretrial release system sometimes is abused in the way that the questioner talked about. It also is a powerful weapon in our ability to make sure that the prison spaces we have are used for violent criminals who need to be detained during a pretrial period. The program, when it's properly run, and I'm very willing as governor to make sure that it is properly run and people are not getting out who don't need to be out, but if it can move people who are accused of nonviolent crimes and who have the opportunity to, you're sure will come back to to stand trial, then I think it does help make space for more violent criminals, and needs to be at least continued at some level for that.
Sam Brown from WKXT Channel 8 TV in Knoxville. Mr. Bredesen, both of you gentlemen are strongly in favor of the death penalty. There has not been an execution in Tennessee in decades. What would you do to expedite your position on the death penalty, or do you think anything should be done?
I think there are some things that have to be done to make sure that the death penalty is carried out, and I really do believe that it can be a deterrent if it's credible, if it is carried out. Obviously, pushing forward in every way we possibly can to bring cases which are currently on death row, there's 101 or 102 of them at this point, to a conclusion is an important part of what a governor can do. I also would like to see some changes in the law which consolidate and shorten the number of appeals that that persons accused of, convicted of capital crimes can make in terms of trying to avoid the death penalty. It's an important issue in this campaign because the next governor is very likely to be in the position of being a person who is in the position to sign a death warrant. And I want people to know that I strongly believe in it, and if it comes to me as governor, which I think it will, that I'm very prepared to go ahead with it. It's an important deterrent.
Mr. Sundquist?
Thank you very much, Sam. I support the death penalty. I think the death penalty is important, and I think predictability of punishment will reduce crime. The particular proposal that Mr. Bredesen mentioned in terms of one broad appeal came from me. It came from a professor of law at the University of Virginia. At the time, I was criticized by some in my opponent's camp for proposing that there be only one broad appeal at the state level. Since then, the state Supreme Court has recommended to the legislature that we pass legislation to only have one broad-based appeal. We can take that first step. The second step will require Washington and Congress to pass habeas corpus reform, and that's important, and I support that as well. I will follow the judgment of people's peers and carry out the death penalty when given the opportunity.
Just as an aside, Congressman Jim Cooper has his own race, but he has suggested that a federal judge here in Nashville be impeached because he's just stretched out these death row appeals so long. Neither one of you, I guess, go that far as willing to impeach a federal judge for doing that.
No, I think that
this
there
is
are
off the clock, so just make it brief, if you will.
Things that are impeachable offenses, high crimes and misdemeanors. I think disagreeing with the decision is not in that category, and I certainly don't support that.
Well, I wouldn't support it either, but I think his actions are reprehensible. They're not reflective of the views of people in this country, and I think what's important is we appoint judges who clearly support capital punishment.
And Mr. Bredesen is nodding his head in agreement there. Okay, you have a question?
Yes. My name is Terry DeMoss. I go to McGavick High School, and I represent the Nashville Urban League. Mr. Sundquist, 2 classrooms of students will be killed in the next 2 days. A direct quote from the television documentary Crusaders. Teenagers are going to juvenile institutions spending little time and are put back in institutions to go and are left and are back out on the street reliving criminal activity. Many neighborhood watch programs either haven't been started in black neighborhoods or police are not plentiful enough to rearrest offenders. What is your plan to combat this problem?
Thank you, Carrie, for a very good question. I think it's important, first of all, that we make our schools safe. It's inexcusable for any weapons to be at a school, and people ought to be kicked out, period, for having weapons at school. For those juveniles who have committed crime, I think we need to reach them earlier in the process. I think it's important that we have a family court. That's been tested in East Tennessee. It's been tested in West Tennessee. We need to get with the families much earlier so we don't wait until it's too late. Lowering the age as to when someone is considered to be a juvenile from 17 to 16, I think will be important as well. Also building a special facility for those incorrigible juveniles who we have one in West Tennessee now who killed 12 people and he's 14 years old. We've got to pull those children away from the rest of those whose lives we can save. I think those kinds of things are important, and we have to separate the children out who need to be put away, who are going to be injurious. But we need to start earlier to start solving the problems of young people.
Well, this is something which is very close to my heart. We had, for the first time, I think in Nashville's history, a child shot in one of our schools accidentally with a gun that had been brought to school this past spring. And I don't know anything that has affected me as deeply in my term as mayor. We are trying everything in our power to make sure that schools are safe for the children to be there. You shouldn't send your child to school in the morning worrying about whether, in fact, they'll come home that afternoon. We have instituted a reward program to try and get kids to turn in guns. We've involved students through student organizations to get them to talk about the dangers of violent weapons in the schools. We've instituted a set of separate schools, a separate school for children who do not, who bring dangerous weapons to school, so we don't have to put them back in the public system. And these are all things which we're trying very hard to have an impact in terms of making schools safe for children to be there.
Your question?
My name is Sharonda Elam Black. I attend Glencliff High School, and I represent Nashville Urban League. I wanted to know, Mr. Bredesen, do you have any plans about activation to inform abused women and children about what they can do in their violent situations?
All right. Well, as you may know, domestic violence has been one of the core items that I've talked about in terms of crime. It is important, first of all, because it's a source of a great deal of violent crime in our communities, and second of all, because it incubates homes in which parents, a man is abusing a woman, parents are abusing children. They create children who grow up and go out and commit these kinds of acts out in the larger society. There's very definite things we can do, and the most important thing is simply to prosecute acts of domestic violence as if they were any other form of violence. You should have no more right to beat up a woman or a child in your home as you do to go in the parking lot of the TV station here and attack a woman or a child. Where that has been done, it works. And it's diametrically opposed to the program that the congressman has proposed of trying to make domestic violence a specially gently treated sort of crime, offering 5 years probation if you simply admit that you did it, and then if you don't beat up your wife again during that 5 years, expunging the record. What works and what has worked in other communities is getting serious about treating domestic violence as any other violent crime and prosecuting it aggressively, irrespective of the participation of the victim. One other thing we need to do in Tennessee is more shelters. We have a number of counties that simply don't have shelter opportunities for women. And while I don't want the state of Tennessee to get in the business of building shelters everywhere, we sure can help with some seed capital. A lot of church and other groups who are trying to find some sanctuaries for women and children who are abused in their homes. It's an important issue.
Mr. Sundquist.
Sharonda, thank you for the question. Mr. Bredesen has misrepresented my views, again, as he has often in this campaign. It's terribly important that we have enough shelters. It's terribly important that we have law enforcement officers who are sensitive to this. It's terribly important that we have elected officials who are sensitive to the problems. A few years ago, Mr. Bredesen said, by the time the police get there, the couples have generally kissed and made up. That was very insensitive. My proposal is, unlike Mr. Bredesen's, his proposal has been deemed unconstitutional. My proposal was put together with some women legislators, Beth Haldeman Harwell, and Karen Williams, and it simply says this: let's get a conviction, let's give an extra tool to the prosecutors, let's make sure we get the conviction. If they can't get a conviction and can't proceed, then there's an opportunity for the prosecuting attorney to say to that person, sign a guilty plea, and then go in for counseling, and we will move you in the right path. So I think we have a good alternative. It's been put together with women, and I think it'll work.
Okay, your question?
My name is Mark Green, and I have a question for Mayor Bredesen. Under most managed care plans, physicians have been able to limit the number of patients that they would see from a particular plan as a business decision. the state of Tennessee has recently proposed a new rule under TennCare, which would prevent a physician from making such decisions in terms of limiting his or her TennCare patient load. I'd like to know what your position is on that rule.
Let me say, first of all, that TennCare is the most important pocketbook issue facing the state that has a number of issues pertaining to it, like the one that you have asked. I think the bottom line in regard to TennCare is, in terms of fixing this program and making it work, do you want someone like Phil Bredesen, who spent 12 of the last 15 years of his life in managed care, or do you want someone who spent 12 of the last 15 years of his life in Congress? There are some basic things we have to do with the program, provider involvement. We have to deal with the issue of overseeing the MCOs properly. We certainly have to deal with the issue of carving out some specific categories. Let me say that the proposal that I saw, I do not support. I certainly believe that any physician who is in private practice has the right to determine whether or not they wish to participate in any given insurance plan, and our job is to make TennCare an attractive alternative for these physicians so that they will want to participate voluntarily in the plan, and we can get rid of things like this cram-down provision and other ways of forcing physicians to do something.
Mr. Sundquist.
Mark, thank you very much. I think that provision is outrageous. I think it will tend to accuse our physicians of being criminals, and it ought to stop. TennCare is very important. The first piece of legislation I offer to the Assembly, General Assembly, will be a crime package. The first big project that I will undertake will be TennCare and health care. Now the question is, do you want someone who's been in business, who understands health care, who understands principles, who's been involved in health care as a national issue, or do you want someone who had one of the biggest HMOs in the country, and 18 months after he sold it, it went bankrupt? That's not good management. That's not what we need in Tennessee. Who has formed other companies, who has a lawsuit going now with Coventry in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or in Pennsylvania somewhere, where there's wire fraud. While he was chairman, this was going on, where there was mail fraud, and it's under RICO. Who has had two security fraud suits brought against him and settled out of court. That's not good preparation and good experience for running TennCare.
Well, you see that this is the problem with the format, because your people insisted that, both of your people insisted that we have one and a half minutes and whatever, 2 minutes and one. I don't know how we're going to get to respond.
I'll find an opportunity to respond later. Let's take the question.
Oh, okay. You understand, I'm between a rock and a hard place because everybody's looking at me to enforce the format everyone agreed on. Okay, your question.
Yes, I'm Helen Grigg, and I'm a student at Hillwood High School. And I'd like to address this question to Mr. Sundquist. I'd like to know, will you explain the real difference that TennCare makes in everyday lives of Tennesseans?
Helen, thank you for your question. We appreciate you being here. Governor McGruder gets a lot of credit for trying to solve the problems of what was Medicaid, and it was bankrupting the country, or the state. Healthcare is a major problem, and I give the governor a lot of credit for trying to find a new solution. There are problems with it that need to be solved, and I believe I know how to solve those problems, and I've given a lot of solutions out there. Auditing and oversight for the healthcare organizations, making sure that the proper treatment is consistent in pharmaceutical goods. Products are being available for everyone. We have an unfair disadvantage to minority providers. They're bearing an unfair load. Lots of problems with it that can be solved. TennCare is very important. I want to make TennCare work. I will make TennCare work, but I will listen to the experts, the providers and the patients and those in mental health. And we will make TennCare work, because people have a right to have a health care system they can trust and can depend on.
Mr. Bredesen.
Yeah, I'd like to say I think TennCare is important to 1.2 million Tennesseans. The program not only takes in persons who would be eligible for Medicaid, but has been expanded beyond that to offer health care insurance to literally hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans who would not otherwise have access to that insurance, would not be able to afford it or can't get it. And I think it's a wonderful effort on the part of the governor to extend what I think is a basic right of citizens of our state to so many more citizens of our state. And I support it. I think that the basic idea behind it is fine. What we have to do now is to take that program and to make it work and to move forward with it.
You have some time left if you want to respond to anything.
Okay, well, I'd like to, if I might then, I'd like to just say, Congressman, that was a fairly outrageous set of allegations that you made back there in answer to some TennCare question. You know perfectly well that the lawsuit you referenced is a RICO lawsuit. That's been thrown out of the process, and I wish you would try and be accurate in your criticisms at least.
We have the formal wrap-up statement from both of you. You can answer a lot of those questions. Another question here?
My name is Ron Overfield. I'm a physician, and I'd like to direct a question to Mr. Sundquist, also related to TennCare. Under TennCare, Blue Cross and Blue Shield requires physicians to accept the Blue Cross TennCare patients in order to participate in the Tennessee Provider Network, or the TPN. And this condition has become known as a so-called cram-down policy. Several physicians have elected not to accept Blue Cross terms and have dropped out of providing this care. And this has provided a situation whereby several teachers, a lot of teachers in fact, and state employees and other people have had to look for physicians elsewhere or to pay higher co-payments. And I want to know if you plan to correct this, and if you do, when.
The cram-down provision is unfair. It's unfair to state employees, it's unfair to teachers, it's unfair to everyone. I believe that the cram-down proposal and the cram-down provision ought to be eliminated, and I will do my best as governor to eliminate the cram-down provision.
There is no question but that cram-down provision has got to be eliminated so that TennCare stands on its own. To me, the money which state employees have earned, have been put into a medical trust fund, is theirs and needs to be held in trust for them and not used for the purpose of influencing other activities in the state. And when I'm elected governor, in the process of fixing some of the problems in TennCare, the elimination of that provision has to be undertaken. You can't do it on the very first day, and I think people need to understand that, because there are so many people who depend for access at this point on it. But if we're able to put this together, which we will be, we use it, I think, building on my experience, if we're able to put this together in a way that it makes good sense to the doctors to participate in TennCare, you don't need a provision like that. And I think we can move very quickly to eliminate that cram-down provision and give state employees the same choice of physicians which they used to enjoy and which other employees of major corporations in the state employ.
Another question.
Hi, I'd like to direct this to begin with to Mr. Bredesen. Right after you won the primary, you said that you would pledge to have a cap of $3 million on your campaign expenses, or your campaign fundraising. And yesterday it was reported that both of you have raised in excess of $15 million. First part of the question is, have you exceeded the $3 million that you stated you were going to stick to? And the second part is, would you support legislation to put a cap on campaign spending?
Was that for me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, first of all, I believe with all apologies, I believe you're incorrect in saying that I ever agreed to any cap on the amount of spending in a political campaign. I think that in the absence of some comprehensive campaign finance reform, that just becomes a kind of Washington-style incumbency protection provision. If we can, in our state, come up with some comprehensive approach to campaign financing and campaign financing reform, and a spending cap is part of that, that's something I'd be very happy to support. I am a strong, strong supporter of ethics in government. One of the first things that I did as mayor of Nashville was to issue an executive order which totally changed the arrangements under which Metro employees work, forbidding many of the kinds of perks and free lunches and free trips that had been a standard, which the Congressman has been involved in over the years. I want to bring that same kind of ethics reform, of ethics standards, to state government, and make sure that we're setting a standard in the executive branch through executive order that makes Tennesseans proud. We need to restore confidence in government at all levels, and I think one of the fundamental ways you do that is to give people assurance that their elected officials and those who work for the state of Tennessee are not in any way being influenced by outside parties.
Mr. Sundquist.
Thank you. I have been a leader on ethics reform in the 12 years I've been in the Congress. I'm proud of that. been supported by Common Cause, Fred Wertheimer, and many others, and joined by Democrats and Republicans alike in support of ethics legislation. Let's get back to your question specifically. Mr. Bredesen has lots of money. He's made millions and millions of dollars off of health care. He is trying to buy an election. He will spend whatever it takes to win this election, he thinks. Now, he spent $5 million when he ran for Congress and for mayor. He will probably spend out of his own pocket $7 or $8 or $9 million in this campaign. I have 15,000 contributors across the state from every single county. I'm proud of that base. I don't think anyone should be able to buy an election because of their wealth.
Your question.
Mr. Sundquist, my name is Wayne Chumley, and I'd like to ask, being above average financially and influentially, do you feel that you have an understanding of the needs of the average citizen?
Wayne, I do, because I think I am an average citizen. I'm the first person in my family to finish high school. I'm the first one to go to college. I believe I'm in touch with Tennessee and the values that Tennesseans have. Whatever I have, I worked hard to get. I share the American dream, and that's why I think it's important in this state that we create opportunities for every single citizen, regardless of color, regardless of gender. I believe it's important that we have model compliance on the civil rights, Section 6 of the Civil Rights Law. So every single person has a right to do business with this state and the federal government. I think it's important that we have available money for venture capital and for operating capital. I believe empowerment, economic empowerment is the American dream, and that's what I want to support. So I am an average American. I just took 12 years off and went to Congress. When I ran, people said, it's time for one of us to go to Washington. And I am. I did, and I am one of them. I'm one of us. And so I'm sensitive. I'm in touch with Tennessee, and I'm in touch with Tennesseans.
Mr. Bredesen.
I'm one of those people who, I guess, came from a background, a small-town background. Andrea and I came to Tennessee 20 years ago with our possessions in the back of an automobile and got an apartment and started building our lives together. When I came here, I was unemployed. I understand what it's like to be unemployed, and that's part of the, I guess, the intensity that I feel about creating jobs and creating economic opportunity. Lord knows this state and this country have been a blessing to myself and Andrea and Ben and our family, but also, believe me, I remember very well where I've come from. I started out, my first job was a paper route, and then worked in a drugstore, and have I guess, I think a gut level understanding of what people all across our state go through day in and day out just trying to make ends meet. And one of the things I want to do as governor is I want to help.
We have a follow-up question here.
My name is Ryan Smith, and my question is for Mr. Sundquist. As most people know, you have accepted many campaign contributions from big business political action committees, and I was wondering what your opinion is of recent proposals to limit these types of contributions.
Ryan, I think you're talking about federally or state?
Yeah, federally.
They are limited federally, and I've proposed in Washington when I was there that we limit any contribution anywhere to no more than 50% of what you can raise in your own district. I also believe that PACs in and by themselves are people, whether it's realtors or whether it's home builders, it's individuals who give to an industry. I am for campaign reform in Tennessee. I believe that we ought to limit the amount of money to the federal level of people who can contribute, and $1,000, $5,000 on PACs, so we limit that. I think that's important to the process, but it's also important that we limit how much an individual can contribute so no one's able to buy an election.
Mr. Bredesen.
Certainly the issue of special interest money in elections is a very, very real one, and I think there are many ways in which that special interest money poisons the political process. My opponent in this election over the years has made almost a career out of taking junkets all over the world, paid for by special interests, accepting honoraria, accepting speaking fees, and I think it really calls into question whether or not when you do that you have the independence of judgment that it takes to do a good job in public office.
I'm sorry we have this format. I just love to turn you two guys loose and, and let you talk about it. We have another question here.
I'm Pam Crittenden with WREG TV in Memphis. And Mr. Bredesen, I'd like to ask you, we have one of the highest sales taxes in the country. We have no state income tax. We're surrounded by states that either have lotteries or gambling or some kind of gaming. What do you propose to do to raise new revenues for the state of Tennessee to keep government running over the next few years?
Okay. First of all, let me say unequivocally I'm opposed to an income tax. I don't think we need it in Tennessee. I think it would be a mistake for us to go down the road of really damaging the engine, the low-tax environment, which has helped us grow so dramatically over this last decade. I think there are things we can do, though, that help, and you mentioned one of them, and that's the subject of a lottery. I support a lottery. As governor, I'm going to ask the legislature to put it on the ballot, and when it is on the ballot, I'm going to actively support it. There is money every day that goes across the borders of Tennessee into surrounding states to support the public education systems in Atlanta and in Georgia and in Virginia and in Kentucky. And I think one of the important things we can do to help keep a good low-tax environment here is to make sure that money does not leak across the border. Now, my opponent has said, you know, gosh, I'll let the people vote on it, but the reality is that no lottery is going to pass in the state of Tennessee without the active support of the governor. And the congressman has said that he's personally opposed to a lottery. The bottom line is, if you want a lottery in Tennessee, you have to elect Phil Bredesen governor.
Mr. Sundquist.
Well, I have great trust in the people of Tennessee. If they want a lottery, they'll vote one in. They don't need me lobbying for it. I'm surprised that Mr. Bredesen is talking about having been against taxes. He spent his first campaign for office was a state senate in Massachusetts called Taxachusetts. He got good training up there. He has supported state income tax in the past. He said that he supported the McWhorter proposal. He said previously in his second term he would consider a state income tax. He proposed a payroll tax in Nashville, and has recently put in one of the biggest taxes on property in the history of Davidson County. And I would say to Davidson County residents, if you think he's lowered your taxes, vote for him. If you think he's raised your taxes, send a message to him and vote for me, because it has been a big tax increase. A sales tax is the best system we have. We don't need a state income tax. We won't have a state income tax with me. We can get money in by creating new jobs. We can get more money in by tourism, better tourism, and bringing more retirees into the state. We don't need a state income tax. I'll veto a state income tax, and the state sales tax, I think, is sufficient for this state as it exists.
Another question?
My name is Herman Gordon. Undoubtedly, both of you oppose the tax raise while you're campaigning. But if there is a drop in the Tennessee economy and revenues do not meet expenditures, what cuts in spending would you make as governor, and what cuts would you recommend or propose to the state legislature, Mr. Sundquist?
Thank you very much. Having said I support the current state sales tax, obviously it's a goal for everyone to reduce the sales tax on food and medicine, but that's a long-term goal. If you say, as I do, that you'll create more jobs in Tennessee without a state income tax, I think we will, and that's been proven. We've led the nation on per capita basis of job increases in the whole country for 10 years. Then you have to be ready when you do have a down slump in the economy. Governor McWhorter has done a good job. He's raised the rainy day fund to something close to $200 million now. It ought to go higher. But what do? You do what you do in your household. You do what every small business person does. You do what governments ought to do, and then governments ought to tighten their belts when there's a downturn in the economy. And that's what we do.
Mr. Bredesen?
I certainly understand that there will be times in the course of the next 8 years when I'm governor that there'll be good times in the business cycle, and there'll be bad times, and times you have to tighten your belt. It's not written in stone anywhere that state government always has to have the same or higher expenditures or revenues. We'll do the same thing that any well-run business does, which is if it comes to fruition that there's a tight year, we'll pull in our horns a little bit. When you have good years, you can be more expansive and you can go out and start new programs. The way, though, you get that done is by having an experienced businessman in the governor's office who has worked with large, complex budgets, who has been out on the front line dealing with these issues and making things happen in the real world, and not spending the last 12 years in Washington just talking about it. Lord knows I don't think that someone who's in the U.S. Congress is going to be an expert on the subject of fiscal responsibility.
Another question?
My name is Annie W. Neal. Congressman Sundquist, a few minutes ago, you made the statement that economic empowerment is an American dream. I agree with you. I have a real concern, however, and my concern is that in Nashville and in the state of Tennessee and in this nation in general, there are people who feel left out of the system and out of that American dream. I would like to know, if you are elected governor, what will you do to assure that people of color, male and female and women, will have a part of the economic development and a piece of economic empowerment, the dream?
Thank you. Ms. McNeil, if we're going to be successful as a nation, if we're going to be successful in Memphis, where I live, as a city, we have to make sure that every single person, regardless of gender and color, has an opportunity to share in the American dream. That's what this country's about. That's what's allowed me to prosper to the extent that I prospered, because I have been in business most of my life. I've been in government. Public service is important for a very short time, relatively, 12 years. We had a reception in Memphis at the Civil Rights Museum. A young lady there who had formed her own business raised her hand and asked the question, said, "I helped start a business. It's doing very well, but I don't have any operating capital. And now I'm late on my car payments. I'm late on my house payments. How am I going to expand my business?" We have to have operating capital. We have to have venture capital. I have met with the African-American business community in Memphis. I believe they're going to endorse me. And I have assured them that we will have a model compliance, Section 6 of the Civil Rights Law, where only 1% of the business done in this state is done within the African-American community. Only 1% of the business done in this city has been done with the African-American community. We have to have that. We're not going to be successful until every single person has an opportunity to be a part of the American dream.
Mr. Bredesen.
I think there are several practical things you can do. Certainly, let me affirm and reaffirm my commitment to enforcing Title VI in our state. That's an important step in the direction that that the questioner was asking about. Second of all, the governor certainly can use the governor's office as a bully pulpit to move forward these agendas. A governor who pays attention to that issue, who makes it clear to their commissioners and the persons throughout the state government that it's an important issue, can help in that process as well. I've tried very hard as mayor of Nashville to find ways to bring this community more into the economic mainstream of our community. This whole Meharry General merger issue, which has been the most difficult thing politically that I've had to deal with as mayor of Nashville, is in part designed to help the African American community in terms of preserving and expanding a very important institution that employs a lot of people.
Your question?
Congressman Sundquist, for the past several years, Tennessee has been attracting overseas markets. Do you have a plan or plans that will increase our marketability as a state?
Absolutely. I was the first in this congressional delegation to support NAFTA. It was important that we are part of that plan, because it will mean more jobs and more sales of agricultural goods overseas. It's important that we're able to sell more overseas. It's important that we create jobs from companies willing to invest in Tennessee. Mr. Bredesen's made a big thing out of trips over 12 years. I've only taken 4 trips at government expense. Vietnam for the MIA question when I was on the Veterans Committee. Nicaragua before the election at the request of the State Department. Geneva for the trade talks. I went on a commercial plane. The other trips, I was chairman of the Republican Trade Task Force. I'm on the trade subcommittee of the most powerful committee in Washington, the Ways and Means Committee. I understand how important trade is. I understand how important investment is. And in our package, our proposal, detailed proposal, where we say Tennessee means business. Number 1, take care of our present employers, help them expand. Number 2, bring in more new companies into Tennessee. And number 3, make sure we get our share of the business overseas and that we get the investments overseas into this state as well.
Mr. Bredesen.
Well, Congressman, I wasn't criticizing your trips taken so much at taxpayer expense. I was criticizing the trips that have been taken at the expense of special interests, and there certainly have been enormous numbers of those. That, to me, is what gets to the heart of the issue of ethics in government, of whether or not you can be independent if you've put yourself in that position of traveling on somebody else's ticket all over the world. I think international trade is very important and vital to the future of Tennessee. One of the proudest accomplishments of my term as mayor has been getting this route flying between Nashville and London. You can now fly 7 days a week for the first time in history between Tennessee and Europe, and that is having an enormous effect right here in terms of economic activity. They estimate it's $250 million a year for the Tennessee economy. It helps to bring tourists in. It helps to establish business relationships between Tennessee and overseas and to attract investment. And I think continuing that process, making sure that Memphis participates, is an important part of Tennessee's strategy for the future.
And your question?
Hi, my name is Michelle McEwen, and I'm representing Nashville Urban League, and I attend McGavick High School. And my question is for Mr. Bredesen. Schools require money for the renovation of property and other academic demands. As a student, I often wonder why fundraisers appear to be the only source that provides assistance. Will your budget provide opportunity in Tennessee's educational system that will prepare us for the 21st century?
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, absolutely committed to the process that Governor McWhorter and the legislature have put underway to fully fund the BEP program. That is making a difference in a lot of schools across the state, and it'll take 3 more years to complete, and it's one of the pledges I've made as governor to see it through. I have also worked hard right here in my job as mayor to try and do everything I possibly can to assist the school systems with some of these kinds of issues. The congressman has just been critical of a property tax increase that I asked for. A substantial part of that tax increase went specifically to the issue of trying to renovate and help some schools, including McGavick High School, which is one of the schools that benefits from that. There are issues in education that are economic issues, things like having safe buildings, having adequate buildings, having computers in the classroom, having class sizes right. And one of my commitments is to make sure that as we move forward in this state, that we find the money in the budgets to make sure that these things are supported. When you're on the front line actually making it happen and actually trying to do something, you draw criticism like I've drawn on this. But I'm going to continue going ahead, doing what I can to make sure that the schools in this state are adequately funded and that children have the right kinds of opportunities within them. That does not mean tax increases. It doesn't mean sales tax increases or income tax increases. But it does mean putting first priority on making sure that children in our state get adequate supplies, get adequate teachers, get adequate equipment and adequate buildings to learn in. It's a very, very high priority with me.
Mr. Sundquist.
I hope you have 2 more years to complete the project in Nashville. It's important that we have a good school system. 21st century classrooms are important, but so are 21st century teachers. It's important that we train our teachers and give them those kind of opportunities to be more skilled as well. I support the program as outlined by and proposed by Governor McWhorter. I think it's important. I support the continuation of that half-cent sales tax so we can continue to invest in schools. We have to start earlier. The at-risk children, early preschool, we have to have lower pupil-teacher ratios if we're going to be successful. I just want to comment on my trips. It's okay for me to go overseas, not okay for me to go overseas with Federal Express or Shearing Plow. It's okay for him to go over with American Airlines on the maiden trip. That's not a junket. By your definition, it is. If you're going to take credit, well, let me finish. If you're going to take credit for the American Airlines London route and leave out Bob Clement and the Airport Commission and say you did it by yourselves, that's fine. That's fine. Now, do you also take responsibility when American Airline flights have decreased? You take credit for that? Thank you.
Boy, I wish I could just turn you guys loose. This is okay. We have another question.
I'm John Fair of the Nashville Urban League. My question is for Mr. Bredesen. As you're aware, Title VI legislation is very important to the people, the African American community. What is your understanding of the Title VI legislation, and what do you plan to do in the enactment and the monitoring of Title VI if you're elected governor?
John, let me try to answer that question, but just clear up one outrageous misstatement that the congressman made. Andrea and I went on the maiden flight to London. We paid for our own tickets. We paid for our own hotel rooms in London. There was in no way any city money or junket money or special interest money or American Airlines money in that process. And
some of my trips I paid as well.
Yes. John, let me try and answer your question. Title VI is, I think, a good and well-meaning attempt to try and bring disadvantaged businesses, minority businesses, much more into the economic mainstream of life in our country. And I want you, first of all, I'm absolutely committed to making sure that it's enforced in Tennessee. There have been some reports critical of the level of enforcement and level of attention. And I think one of the most important things a governor can do is, first of all, appoint commissioners and subcommissioners, assistant commissioners, who are committed to the notion of equal opportunity, who are committed to the notion that African Americans are entitled to full participation in the economic life of our state and doing business with the state. If that requires, as these reports have suggested, some sort of a special commission or an office within government to monitor that compliance, I'm very willing to go ahead and establish that, because I think it is a very important aspect of the commitment that our state makes to all the communities across Tennessee. There are also aspects of Title VI which attempt to ensure full participation of minorities in the decision-making process about how monies are spent. That's something I'm very proud of, my record in Nashville. In terms of boards and commissions that we've appointed, about 23% of my appointments have been African Americans, as reflected against about the 22% that represents its proportion of African Americans in our community. That, I think, is very much in the spirit of what Title VI is trying to accomplish, and something I'm very proud of and going to continue as governor.
Okay, Mr. Sundquist.
John, thank you. I think I've commented on this earlier, but it's doing what's right. It's giving everybody a fair bite at the apple. It's making sure that you set an example in the kind of cabinet you have, in the kind of promotions you make as governor. Being governor is a bully pulpit, and you have to lead this. And I assure you, we will treat people fairly. We will fulfill the intention of Section 6 of the Civil Rights Law, and we will have enabling legislation that will monitor that.
Your question.
Yes, I'm Brent Hurst, a public school educator here in Nashville. I have a question for Congressman Sundquist. As you alluded to earlier, both you and Mayor Bredesen both indicate that you support the BEP and are committed to the full funding of it. What I'd like to know is please, for you could be a little bit more specific on, tell us what the 5 most important features are in that BEP and why you think they are the most important, and please be specific.
Well, I think that what we set is long-term goals in education. We've set together a funding mechanism as a part of that as to how we achieve those goals. It's important that we have lower pupil-teacher ratios. It's important that we emphasize the early years. It's important that that schools in small counties have opportunities for funding as other counties have. It's important that we continue the funding of it through the completion, and it's important as well that we long-term make a commitment to education so we can pay our teachers more, so we can have the kind of school systems that will allow us to move up nationally, so we can prepare our children for a job after school. So in the broadest sense, it's our roadmap for the future in education. I'm committed to that. I believe we have to think long-term. I believe that there's nothing more important in the state of Tennessee long-term than having a good educational system.
Mr. Bredesen.
I think there are several important aspects to it. One certainly is the funding, the equalization of school funding across the state component of it. I'm absolutely committed to that. It'll take 3 more years at approximately the current levels or the long-term historical levels of growth to achieve that, and it's something that I'm going to achieve. Second of all, there are aspects of the entire reform program, which is getting equipment into schools, computer equipment and the like. I'm very strongly supportive of that. I think that the use of technology to expand the ability of teachers to teach is important. I fully support the accountability provisions in it, something that the congressman has been at least questionable about. I do believe that it's the state's fundamental responsibility to oversee those school systems, and that if that requires removing a superintendent, for example, who's not doing the job, that it's the obligation of the governor to do so. And last of all, I'd support the measurement aspects of it, trying to get our arms around not just the process in the school system, but measuring the results, measuring what happens in a classroom, what happens in a school, what happens in a school district.
Another question?
Gentleman, Gary Mack from WDEF News 12 in Chattanooga. I'll start with Mr. Bredesen, but Mr. Sundquist used the word reprehensible when talking about guns in schools and about an incident, a shooting incident in West Tennessee. You've talked about a shooting incident in a Nashville high school, and in just about every city, and even in Chattanooga, we've had drive-by shootings and teenagers involved with weapons. Representative Harold Stockburger, right up the road from us in Cleveland, Tennessee, pushed in the legislature this past session a bill that will allow Tennesseans to carry handguns anywhere in the state of Tennessee. As part of your crime legislation, would you favor or oppose that?
I don't have a problem with that particular bill, because it seems to me that attempts in the state of Tennessee to in some way control or limit firearms are never going to be successful in dealing with the crime issue. There are simply too many guns out there. I do believe that Tennesseans, individuals, have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, and I don't propose to try and alter that in any way. There are many heinous crimes that are committed, but when I look at them, it's hard for me to see one of those crimes that was somehow committed with a legal gun, that if we made it illegal in some way, it would improve the situation. And I just don't believe in gun control as one of the essential elements in fighting crime in our state. I do believe in being very tough on persons who do use guns in the perpetration of a crime. I think that what has to be done about crime is pretty simple. It's strong enforcement of the death penalty. It is truth in sentencing, getting criminals to serve out their sentences when they're caught and properly convicted. It certainly is some attention to preventive programs, things like preschool programs and the juvenile programs that try to help children get off of the road, which is leading them down to criminal activity and to becoming criminals. But I just don't see, and I never have seen, maybe it's my small town upbringing, but I've never seen gun control as particularly an effective way of dealing with that issue. I think there are many more effective things that can be done.
Mr. Sundquist.
I don't think the problem is gun control. I think the problem is self-control in this country. I think that law-abiding citizens have a right, constitutional right, to bear arms. I've been endorsed by the National Rifle Association. I believe that we can, through the licensing procedure that was put into the law in the state legislature, I think it can work out and work well. What's the problem? Why do people want guns? One of the problems is they don't feel safe. And one of the reasons they don't feel safe is that we don't have a good crime program in this country, in this state. I have a crime package that will work. Predictability of punishment will reduce crime. Mr. Bredesen has a truth in sentencing proposal that will say if a rapist supposed to serve sentence for 21 years and serves 7, we ought to make it 7. Mine said, no, let's make them serve more than 7. So tough sentencing, predictability of punishment, I think is the real problem we have.
Okay, your question?
Good evening. My name's Joanne Pullis, and I'm with the Nashville Women's Political Caucus. This question is for Mr. Bredesen. To drive a car, we're required to perform a basic proficiency and skills test. No such training or tests are required for new parents. You're a parent and have listened to many parents throughout your term. The incidence of child neglect, child abuse, and even child death is increasing. What ideas do you have to address this?
Well, it is the circumstances into which children are born. There are many loving and caring parents throughout the state of Tennessee, and there are also situations in which children are born that your heart goes out to them from the moment they come into the world. I think there are a number of things we can do. The most basic, obviously, has got to be to break the sort of cycle of poverty which exists in too many homes in our state. That's a combination of job training. It's a combination of welfare reform, and that ultimately has to be the most basic thing. In the shorter term, I really believe that parenting classes, working with people who want to be good parents but don't necessarily know how to do it, obtained through the higher education system, obtained through the public education system, can be something which could help in that regard. You are perfectly right that parenting is not something which everyone understands and knows naturally when they find themselves a father or a mother to be. But we certainly have a lot of resources in the state that we can help to bring to bear on that, and I think that a little education education can yield enormous benefits in terms of the health of the child, in terms of the ultimate educational attainment of the child, and I strongly support it.
Mr. Sundquist?
I think breaking the cycle is a big part of it. But to break the cycle, you need to have education. We need to solve the problems of poverty. We need to solve the problem with drugs. That's a very, very serious problem that we have. We need welfare reform. I think it's licensing won't work, but I think that there are things we can do within the present system, within the state government and human services, where we can make some changes, where we can put more resources into helping solve the problem. It's a terrible problem, and we need to reduce the problem and solve it if we can.
Time now for the closing statements. By a flip of the coin, Phil Bredesen will go first.
Thank you. I want to close tonight by telling you a personal story about how I learned about taxes. My first job was in Ogden's Rexall drugstore, a minimum wage, $1 an hour. When I started the job, I was too young to be legal in the job, and I got my pay on Friday in an envelope with $20 in cash in it for 20 hours of work. I took that money home each Friday and actually had a little Popular Mechanics magazine that I'd carefully cut out and put a little secret spot in, and I'd put the money in it and put it back on the shelf. When my birthday came along, I got legal, and I also got a big surprise because my pay envelope now contained $14 and change and a slip telling me where all the rest of it went to, things like FIT and FICA. It was a real education to me very early on in life of the realities of the tax system. 35 years and a lot of experience and a lot of work, hard work, has gone on since Ralph Ogden hired me to be in that drugstore. But I want you to know that if I'm elected governor, if you'll hire me to be your governor, I won't keep your money in a Popular Mechanics magazine, but I will give the same time and attention and care to taking good care of your tax money as that kid did 35 years ago.
Now for his closing statement, Mr. Sundquist.
Chris, thank you very much, and thank the network for allowing us to be here this evening, and to our guests who have asked such, I think, targeted questions that were very, very helpful. I started out at 50 cents an hour. I guess we're in a bidding war here, but I had a paper out before that. I worked in a grocery store. I did about everything a person can do in a grocery store, and I carried that through and became a small businessman. I understand what it is to borrow money at the bank. I understand what it is to hire people. I understand what it is to fire people. I understand the burdens of regulations. I went into public service for 12 years because I wanted to put something back in the system that allowed me to be reasonably successful. I've stayed 12 years. I said I would do that and come home, and I have. I said I'd vote my conscience, and I have. I understand what Tennesseans want in government. I believe that I'm in touch with Tennesseans. They want welfare that leads to work. They want criminals punished, not victims and police officers. They want good roads, education you can depend on, health care, and no state income tax. I'm your person. I want to be your governor. I need your help to be your governor, and I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for being with us. I think we owe them a round of applause for being with us tonight. Don't forget to vote. You can vote early in Tennessee. You can do that now. Good night, everybody.